Hi, everybody. I'm getting a little bit of feedback here. I think that might be, I'll mute Diane and see if that works. Okay. Hi, everybody. What's up? My name is Seth Perler. My site is sethperler.com. You can check it out during or after if you want. You may not want to check it out during because I'm going to go fast. I have a lot to say. We have a lot of parents and we have a lot of teachers and educators on. I was looking in the comments. People were sharing who they were. I won't be able to see in the comments during the webinar very much, but I'll do Q&A at the end. So if you want to do a question, you can put it in the Q&A or you can put it in the chat, but it's not always going to be easy for me to find them at the end. So because I can't scroll through all of them at the end. But I'll be telling you when I'm going to do Q&A at the end so that you can ask at that time and I can start answering questions. I'll stay on as long as I can for everybody at that time. And let's go ahead and get started. So tonight, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a PowerPoint while I'm doing this. I don't usually do that, so bear with me as it happens. It should work fine, but just bear with me if it doesn't. So let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully you can see this well. Can somebody just affirm? Diane, can you tell me, can you pop on and let me know if the screen share is working fine?
Well, if you just put it into the slide mode, it might be easier to see.
Okay, but you can see my slide?
You can see it. You can mostly see it, yeah.
Okay. Oh,
Yep.
You can't see the whole thing?
Maybe I just need to rearrange my screen, but for the most part, yes, you can see it.
All right, great. Okay, thank you very much. All right, cool. So basically, the topic tonight is executive function, how parents and teachers can support struggling students. And let me tell you, to do this in an hour, this is a massive, gigantic, gargantuan topic. So the dog here is drinking from the fire hose. So that's what's going to be happening during this presentation tonight. You're going to be drinking from the fire hose. Be ready to take notes and jot down some ideas from this. Now, if you are a parent or a teacher who is very linear and who likes to take a lot of notes, please don't think that you have to take all the notes in the world. A lot of this stuff is on my site. I have free resources for you that I'm going to give you tonight. I'll show you where that's at later, and you don't need to take every note. What I want you to walk away from this presentation, I want you to walk away with this with a vibe. I don't want you to walk away thinking, I need to know every strategy, every detail, everything. So for those of you detail-oriented people particularly, please focus on getting the vibe, because if you focus on that, you're really going to have a greater feeling for what you can do to support your child or your students rather than knowing every detail of how to help them, because I can't get into all the details of everything with that during this presentation. Having said that, I know I'm speaking fast because I have a lot going on. Who are you? So basically, we have, I know that you can see the side here, and that's totally fine, of the presentation. We have mostly parents and teachers. As I was looking in the chat, there are more teachers than I thought, or at least more teachers said hello than parents. So I'm going to speak a lot to teachers tonight. So we have parents and teachers of gifted kids, particularly. Now, there might be others, and you can definitely adapt what I teach tonight to any student, but that's generally who you all are in the audience. Who I am, that's me as a little boy, and at that age, I didn't have any notable executive function struggles. But as I grew older, I definitely struggled with school and executive function. Literally, in first grade, my report cards and progress reports started saying, daydreamer, does not pay attention, doesn't try hard enough, needs to focus, yada, yada, yada. So it started really early for me, and I still experience this stuff today. So this is something that I've lived, and then the students that I work with and the clients that I serve, I focus on them partially because I'm the wounded healer. We often teach what we need to learn most. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of a professional. I was a teacher for, well, let's go here. So I am a speaker. I do YouTube videos every single week. They're in depth. I talk to teachers, parents, and students in the different videos, do a lot of podcasts. I have online programs. I'm an executive function coach. That's my primary thing, and the thing that I love is being an executive function coach and working with students and families and helping students figure out how to work with their executive function. So, and then also TFOS, the Executive Function Online Summit, that's my summit that Diane was referring to before. ExecutiveFunctionSummit.com, we're going to have it again coming up this August. It was awesome. So I'll link to that. You don't need to worry about that right now because I'll get that to you. So anyhow, and I was a teacher for 12 years and I have a master's in gifted and talented education. And what happened was I gravitated towards students who struggled with executive function. Now at the time, even having a master's in executive function and being a teacher for 12 years, I had hardly ever heard of executive function. In fact, when I started my own business and doing the executive function coaching in 2010, I really wasn't very aware of executive function then. But that I knew that those were the students that I wanted to work with. And once I figured out what was going on with executive function, right around then, a light bulb went off in my head and I said, oh my gosh, all the kids, pretty much all the kids that are struggling in my classes, gifted or not, they are struggling with executive function. And I tended again to be good with kids who were 2E, who were gifted and talented, but who were struggling, who were failing, who were falling through the cracks. So that's what I specialize in. This is my site tonight. On my site, you don't have to go there now. I'd rather you pay attention here. But I have an assessment for you. And here's my YouTube channel. You can check that out. I will show you this slide a couple more times tonight, but that's what my site looks like. This is an executive function systems assessment I have for you on a secret page on my site. It's really good. And this is going to help teachers and parents a lot. This is going to be really key. I'm going to spew so much stuff at you, but that's going to be really key in making sense of this all and in a concrete, linear way. Hi, Donna. All right, so here we go. First thing I want to say is thank you to the teachers. You all are, I cannot even believe the position you're in right now. You're in a very difficult position to have to figure out all of these unknowns around what's happening this fall. So thank you for showing up, for being there for kids. We need you. It's the most important job in the world. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, parents, for being here, for caring enough to take the time to learn about executive function and to really do things that are going to hopefully make a difference for your kid. And thank you to Diane and Lauren for making this happen. When something like this happens, a lot of work goes on behind the scenes, and we have a team of at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people here that have been a part of making this happen tonight. So thank you all for taking the time, the effort, and making all the moving pieces go together. How I organized this tonight, I was trying to do it where I had a section for parents and a section for teachers. That's what they asked me to do. But in creating this presentation, there's so much overlap. It was really hard to do it this way. Those of you who are teachers out there can imagine that having these 2 different audiences, and it was supposed to be workshop style. I have so much to throw at you. I'm not worrying about the workshop style. Just take the notes that you need to take notes on. This is not going to be linear. Now this is linear. I'm going to start off, parents and teachers, with the A to the B, the journey that we're all on. And I'm guessing that everybody here can follow this. If you can't follow this, this is probably not the webinar for you. We're going from point A to point B. Point A is you're a parent or a teacher or some professional and you're worried about a child who's struggling and you want to help this kid and you're ready to take action. So those 3 things: you're concerned, you want to help, and you're ready to take action. And then we're going to point B. Point B is this point, especially for parents. Point B looks like, my kid's gonna be okay. So at this point, your child has what I call good enough executive function. It is not perfect, but it's good enough that you know that your kid's gonna be able to build a good future for themselves. They've got these things down well enough. Now, in order to get there, we have to do a few steps. First thing you have to do is understand the problem. There's so much misinformation, myths, and misunderstandings, and that's part of why these kids fall through the cracks. So we need to understand. Step 2, the relationship is the most important thing. We have to connect. Whether you're a parent or a teacher, that relationship is so key. You're going to hear me throughout this whole webinar tonight talk about relationship, relationship, relationship. Step 3, you have to get buy-in. So we can force buy-in with punishments, with rewards, with arguments, with logic, with reason, all of these things that may seem to work temporarily, but it's not true buy-in. In order to get true buy-in, the relationship has to be there where the student is willing to take these risks and do the things that we're asking them to do. Step 4 is address underlying problems. I'm going to talk about iceberg theory. Now, in my site here, I have a iceberg theory is very important in what I talk about, but here is an article on my blog called Hidden Influences Iceberg Theory. Is it a can't or is it a won't? And then I have a video on it, and then I have a PDF, and then you can print that PDF up. But iceberg theory talks, and then there you can print it right here. But iceberg theory talks about how there are often things that are going on underneath the surface that are not noticed. They're invisible. They're not being addressed. And if you're a parent or a teacher and we're not addressing those things, then what happens is it's the can't or the won't. We assume that it's a won't, that the student isn't trying hard enough, that they're being lazy, that if they just did this or that or cared more or whatever, that everything would be okay. So I want you to learn about iceberg theory. It's very important. So the next one is address underlying problems, whatever underlying problems might be there. The next 3 things are building foundations. Now in my coaching, this is more of what you're going to see in my stuff. I'm working with their mindsets, their systems, and their habits. I'll talk more about that later. Mindsets, the main thing you need to know is that these kids are resistant. They go to the resistance mindset. I don't want to. Why do I have to do this? This is stupid. This is boring. This is dumb. I can't. These mindsets and excuses and reasons that they have for not executing, not taking action. Action that is in their own best interest long term, but often not short term. Video games are more fun, social things are more fun, whatever. So, but they need a mindset that say, okay, I can do this, I can overcome my resistance. So they need those sorts of mindsets. Systems are the things that you teachers see a lot of problems with here. The systems are the backpack, the locker, the desk where they study at home, their folders, their papers, getting their homework turned in, their planners. These are all systems that they need to master in order to be successful. Kids who don't struggle with executive function do fine with systems. These kids struggle with systems. Then the last thing that these kids need that I'm coaching with a lot is the habits and routines. So they need the mindset, they need the systems, but they need to implement the systems. They need to build habits and routines where they're using the systems so they can be successful. Because if they don't figure this stuff out, then getting to that point B with a sigh of relief where we get to say, okay, this kid's going to be okay, is going to be really hard if they don't have systems, mindsets, and habits that are helping them to execute in order to achieve their goals and dreams in life. So after that, then we have implement and maintain. And all that means is the implementation means that we're implementing or practicing using the systems, habits, and mindsets. And the next part, the maintain, is maintenance. That's a great place to be. That's where we're really polishing systems, where kids have them. They're sharpening the sword. You're really in a great place once you get to that point right there. Now, once we go through that then we're at that step, at that point B. We've gone from point A to point B. So I wanted to start off this webinar because parents and teachers, if you're still on this webinar, you're probably at that place. You want to see the kid get from point A to point B. That's the whole point. So I wanted to set you up with that right here, right now. This is from one of my students, Evie, and she said, yay, for the first time. Sorry, I got to move my my Zoom thing is in the way. Sorry, for the first time ever, I think that I can actually get all A's this quarter. I hope I can do it. Just want to say thanks for all the help you've given me and pushing me to do the things I need to do in order to succeed. So that's the point B. That's where we want to get. This was after I stopped working with Evie. I don't work with her anymore. She's just graduated just now. And that's good that I don't work with her anymore because she has gotten to that point B. Again, it's not perfect, but it's good enough executive function. We can breathe that sigh of relief. So how do we get from that point A to point B? Anybody who doesn't address the resistance, in my opinion, is doing it wrong. So there are a lot of ADHD coaches and people out there who have great strategies, great techniques, great ideas, but they're not addressing the resistance. We have to address the resistance. And briefly, I'm going to mention two very important ways of addressing the resistance. Now, you all watching here right now, you might have exceptional executive function, you might have horrible executive function, or you might be anywhere in between. I'm guessing if we were to look in the chat, actually, we can even do that right now. What would you give yourself on executive function on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being exceptional, 1 being you're someone who struggles with executive function, with getting things done a lot. 5, 4. So we got 2. So good. Thank you for being honest. We got a 9 there. So Lisa's a 9, and we got a 10 there. These are people who they are systems thinkers, right? And then we have people on the whole opposite end of the spectrum. 8s and 9s, these are people with very strong executive function. 6 is sort of mid-range. So we have these kids. Okay, let me find my train of, okay. So if we don't address the resistance with these kids who, let's say they are a 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1 in terms of executive function. They struggle, they're not systems thinkers, they tend to be very right brain, they're often very creative, but they struggle to execute, to get the things done that they need to get done. If we don't work with resistance, we're not doing our best to help them. What does that mean? Two things. Now, this is an important thing that I'm going to explain right here. So slow down for a moment. The resistance, procrastination, which is another word for resistance, the resisting taking action, a lack of motivation or being unmotivated, that's resistance, resisting taking action, okay? Those things that are resistance come down to two things, the story and the body. Here's what I mean. If we are addressing the resistance, we are listening attentively, trying to really understand the student's story or narrative in their mind about what's going on. So let me give you one example of a resistance story. Here's a great resistance story. Oh my gosh, it's the end of the semester. I have so many things to do, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what I have to do. I don't know how long it's going to take me to write this stupid paper. I can't do it. It's overwhelming. I have a giant mountain to climb. I'm just going to pretend this isn't happening. I just don't know where to start. That is the story, the narrative. That's the one part of it. We have to work with that. Now, unfortunately, oftentimes we adults in working with that, especially if we are somebody with an 8, 9, or 10 in executive function, the people who are an 8, 9, or 10 in executive function who wrote that before are the people who see that giant list of things and they are motivated by it. They want to check things off the list. They want to cross those things off, be done with them. They will feel so much better when it's over. And then they use that logic when speaking to the child who struggles with this stuff and say, you're going to feel so much better when it's over. Just do this, this, and this. Why can't you just get started? And we use logic and reason and lectures and nagging and punishments and rewards to motivate. We're using all of these things, but what we're not doing is we're not listening to the narrative and the story and just holding space for that and helping them process that. We're trying to tell them why that story isn't valid rather than validating the story and holding space and helping them to overcome their own resistance. Okay, so I said this is a very important part. I'm going to slow down. Hopefully that made enough sense. We have a story and a narrative. Now, those of you with exceptional executive function, you also have resistance, but it's just in other areas of life. You may be resistant to having very difficult conversations with somebody who's close to you that you really need to speak your truth. You may have resistance with whatever your things are that are you just don't have resistance when it comes to tasks and executing on the tasks that the students are being asked to do or the similar tasks for your life. Now, I said the story and the narrative, and I said the body. Here's the thing. We don't teach teachers this. We don't teach parents this. But when we are feeling resistant, there is a physiological change in the body. I'm going to be very brief about this, but in the brain, there is an amygdala, a small part of the brain that helps us with what's called fight, flight, freeze, or faint. There's also something called polyvagal theory, which for those of you who want to look it up, it's amazing, polyvagal theory. But basically, imagine that the story in your head, in your mind, the story in your mind is, I'm being threatened. I'm not safe. Our kids feel that when we're like, oh, you need to do this homework, or you got to climb this mountain of tasks to do, and they don't know where to start. It's overwhelming. And the mind feels overwhelmed, and it says to the amygdala, hey, I'm not safe. I feel threatened. And what do we do when we feel threatened? We fight, we run, we hide, we withdraw, we flight, we freeze. So these kids, they don't know where to start. The body is having an experience, but we don't articulate it very well in this culture. So what I want to tell you is that the more you as the parent, the teacher, the more you as the adult can do your own deep inner work and work on yourself being able to articulate what's going on somatically in the body. I'll talk more about this later today, but the more you can do that, the more you model it, the more you can do what's called co-regulate. You can work with their nervous system. You're not just working with the narrative and the story, but you're also working with the nervous system, and you're seeing them and you're saying, wow, I notice your shoulders are tense. I notice you're hunched over. I notice your fists are gripped when we're talking about math or when we're talking about your planner. I know, so we're co-regulating and mirroring and noticing that they're having an experience. If we can address the resistance and address those two things and help them learn tools to work with the narrative and question, they do need to know how to question it. I'm not saying that we don't work with but that they learn to get more realistic about it, and we can help them work with the body, and that there are very uncomfortable sensations in the body that are reinforcing the story. If we don't work with that, we're missing so much of what needs to happen in order to help these kids. So I said step one is understand. Let's get clear on the problems. I want to read a couple of things for you. These are some things from my Facebook groups. I'm exhausted. Our marriage is strained. These are real, by the way. 2 phones and our computer now destroyed out of frustrations with school at home by an 11-year-old son. Pre-algebraic thinking and math and personal narrative is going to drive us over the edge. Throwing out a 911. So people are really struggling. And what parents are saying, there's number one thing parents says, I just want my kid to be happy and successful. So I hear some iteration of that a lot. Then I hear parents say, and this is for 2E, parents of 2E kids and parents of kids who struggle with executive function. How do we get the school to understand? How do we get the teachers on board? How do we get them to buy in? The teachers aren't teaching executive function. They don't get my kid. The teacher is set in their ways. They're not flexible. The teacher doesn't understand processing issues or attentional challenges. And it takes my kid forever to do these things. It doesn't mean that my kid's not trying or has low cognition. My kid feels shamed, feels bad about themselves. My kid is losing their love of learning. My kid is getting the message that they're lazy or they're not trying hard enough, or they just need to put forth more effort, or that they're unmotivated, or they just need to be more disciplined, or they don't care enough. There's too much busy work. The portals are a mess. Teachers, the parents have so much trouble navigating the portals. That's one of the biggest things that you can do this fall. They won't make accommodations without documentation. They say it's not fair to the other. So anyhow, parents are saying things like this. This is another Facebook comment. I am not going to read that one. And then students are, you guys know this, students are sometimes saying that school sucks, it's so boring, why do I have to do this? These are the resistance things. I hate school, I don't want it, my teacher hates me, all my teachers hate me. They'll get very extreme and black and white. I'm bad at math, I'm bad at history, when will I ever use this? And they'll often a lot of them will just do the bare minimum just to stay off the radar. So again, we're going to step 2 now, and it's about connection and relationship. And I'm sure you've seen this quote, but I've learned that people forget what you said, forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. I, to this day, can remember one of my teachers and just how awful I felt about myself with this one particular teacher. We remember that stuff. Our nervous system remembers that stuff. So much of what we're doing is really connecting with the nervous system and how they feel. So let me go here. This is a famous Banksy piece on a wall somewhere. No future. Why school? Education, educare. So why are we even here in school? I always like to zoom out to what the heck we're doing anyhow. We are in school, we are educating our kids because of educare. Latin means to raise or to bring forth or to bring up. What do we do with our kids? We raise our kids. We bring up kids. Imagine the words we use. We use those words. I'm raising kids. What does that mean to raise? It means educate, education. So we're trying to take this infant and we're trying to raise them to when they're 17, 18, 19, 20, whatever, that they are able to launch. I use the word launch a lot. They're able to launch a good future. They're able to have good enough executive function to launch a good life for themselves. So I just wanted to back up and go to what the heck are we doing here anyhow? We're trying to help them launch. Now, when you can't execute, you have trouble launching. You have trouble getting the education that you need. Now, I wanted to say this, particularly for the teachers out there. Once in a while, it really hits people that they don't have to experience the world in the way that they've been told to, because what happens is that we are indoctrinated in these systems and we often aren't even questioning how things run. But once we start questioning things, for example, Seth, I think that letter grades are morally wrong. And those are strong words, but I think they're morally wrong. Grades are archaic. They shouldn't be there anymore. Yes, we need to assess. We need authentic assessment, yada, yada. But grades, I think, especially for these kids, are wrong. So anyhow, the point is that you can question. I really want to empower you, parents and teachers, to question the things that rub you the wrong way. Don't just let them slide and say, oh, that's just the way it is. Definitely question those things. I want to talk a little bit about what 2E is. I'm sure most of you know, but 2E is this. We have these spectrums, these ranges where kids are in ability levels in all these different areas. And your 2E kiddo is your kiddo who is gifted and talented legitimately in some area, where they legitimately need some sort of accelerated or compacted or advanced instruction in some area, but they also have learning challenges or deficits in another area. So these kids are very, very complicated. And I'm going to mention the word asynchrony here. They don't develop synchronously. So if you think about a fifth grader being at fifth grade level in all these different areas, these kids are at all different levels. They might be at high school in this level. They might be reading at high school level. Their handwriting might be at third grade level. Their math might be at 10th grade level, but their ability to track details in the math is at a fourth grade level. So they don't look like they know what they're doing in math, even though they do, but they never show their work. And yet, so anyhow, kids can be all over the place. And 2E kids are super asynchronous. They're even more asynchronous than your typical gifted and talented kid. So blah, blah, blah. I think I'm going to skip that one. So there are 4 problems with, and I will talk more about what executive function is for those of you who are new to it. I'm sure you already get the point more or less, but there are 4 big problems that I see. One is, I know a lot of you have seen this, is that for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. So we have these kids that are neurodiverse, that are asynchronous, that are unique, that are differently wired, that are complicated, and they don't. So one of the problems for these kids is the system, is the standardization ideas and the things that sort of underlie how curriculum is often built. Next problem is the dip pattern. This is where kids start off the semester strong. Kids who struggle with executive function, their semester starts strong. They start dipping. 6 to 8 weeks into the semester, they got a bunch of Fs, a bunch of missing, zeros, and completes, late work. They spend the rest of the semester trying to dig themselves out of that pit. And then they do a Hail Mary at the end of the semester, the last 2 weeks, trying to pass classes. So, and then number 1 problem is the resistance, as I mentioned thoroughly, and then I mentioned that enough. And then finally, number 4, the 4th problem here is shame, is that we parents and teachers both often have grown up in a culture that has used shame. People, very well-intended people, have shamed us into action. And for these kids who don't respond to this, what happens, they get the message, you're lazy, you're just not motivated, you don't try hard enough, you're not disciplined, you don't care enough about school. They're very misunderstood. They have legitimate executive function problems, but people think it's a matter of will. What happens? A lot of them internalize it. They start to think, I'm bad. I'm not a good person. I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. I'm broken. I'm not smart. I'm stupid. I'm dumb. They start to internalize that there's something wrong with them. This is horrible, because once we get to this point, it really takes a lot to start switching it. And then their narrative and their story, they cling more and more onto, it's too hard. I can't. I just give up. So those are the 4 problems. Now, I mentioned before iceberg theory, and I showed you that part of my site. We need to be addressing the stuff below the surface. What we see on top of the surface is the zeros, the missings, the incompletes, the late work, and those sorts of things. But we're not seeing necessarily the shame or the depression or the anxiety or the overwhelm or that they were bullied or whatever the thing is that's beneath the tip of the iceberg that's also impacting them and impacting executive function. I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to move on to this one. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this thing called attachment theory, because parents and teachers, the more we understand our attachment styles, the more we can be secure bases for those kids. So the relationship is everything, as I said, and we want to be secure for the kids. And we all have different attachment styles that we've learned from our parents or our primary caretakers when we were growing up. And we want to be secure. What does that mean? We want our kids to come to us and to communicate with us and to feel safe and secure and not threatened so that they can come to us. And what happens with attachment theory is you basically have the yellow ones, which are insecure, all 3 of those. I'm going to be real brief about this, but you can look up attachment theory. And then we have the secure. So the secure, they're comfortable with intimacy, they feel safe, there's a healthy vulnerability between people, they're emotionally tuned, and it's empathetic, it feels connected, it feels together, that it feels secure. Anxious, they're preoccupied with the relationship. They might use the word needy or clingy. They're worried about what others think. They tend to be sensitive. They may not communicate directly. They seek a lot of approval. And avoidant is sort of the opposite. They tend to be neglectful or distant or closed off, often independent. Relationships are not as important to them. They don't express their emotions easily. They withdraw a lot. And then the disorganized is sort of a mix of the two. So of the anxious and avoidant. Now, everybody goes into all of them, but some people are more anxious, some are more avoidant, some are more secure. But what we're looking for is we want to create more and more and more secure relating, whether we're a teacher or a parent, with the student, so that they feel seen, heard by you, understood by you, like you've got their back. And so anyhow, that's very important if we want to be able to help them and get them to have buy-in. For some families, especially if you have a high schooler, you know, your student may have figured out a lot of ways to push you away by that time. So the earlier we start addressing these things, the better. So this is a lot here, and I don't have this on the PDF, but I'm going to record this for you so you can come back to this slide later. But relational tools, so this is for parents and teachers that can be adapted for both, but what we want to do is build more securely attached relationships. Each one of these I'm about to show you, I could talk about for 20 minutes. So I'm going to be really brief. Maybe I'll pick 3. Let me do the 3-to-1 rule. The 3-to-1 rule here says that there are 3 positives to every 1 perceived negative. So basically, a lot of my work that I'm doing with students who are resistant is seeing them, is saying, so the 3-to-1 rule just says 3 positives to every 1 negative, but I'm noticing everything I can that they are doing, quote, right. I'll be like, oh, you got your pencil out on your own. That's awesome. Then I look away and move on. I want it to sink in. So, hey, you're a really good writer. Hey, I noticed that your backpack's more organized than last time. What did you do? How did you do that? Like, everything, hey, those are cool shoes. I notice everything I can. And I'm not being inauthentic. This is very important. And parents, you just want to and it's going to take time, parents, especially if you have, if there is a lot of hurt in the relationship and a lot of anger and stuff that's been building for years. It's going to take time, but you start with a 3-to-1. You really want them to feel seen. It might take a while for them to get used to that. So that's one that I'm going to mention. I'm going to talk about pre-conversations here. Pre-conversations, parents and teachers, are one of the biggest things that I do too. Pre-conversations means that you know how you have to get mentally prepared? Like I have to go to the dentist, Seth does in a month or so. I don't like the dentist, so I have to get mentally prepared for going to the dentist. And I know when it's coming up and all that stuff, and I can sort of mentally prepare. Well, in doing pre-conversations, we're helping our child mentally prepare. A lot of kids who struggle with executive function, listen very carefully, a lot of kids who struggle with executive function, they feel like the rug's been pulled out from under them because they don't transition well. They don't pivot well from activity to activity. So when we say, hey, you know what? Sorry, we got in an argument. I'm going to come back and talk to you in 10 minutes, and I'm going to apologize and tell you how I feel, and I would love to hear how you feel. So it's priming the pump. It's saying, hey, here's what's coming. Hey, we're going to be leaving in 5 minutes. Hey, we're leaving in 3 minutes. Hey, we're leaving in 1 minute. Hey, we're leaving now. It's letting them know what's coming. And this can be in the classroom or at home. So pre-conversations I use in so many ways because I'm going to be asking my students to overcome the resistance and do things they don't want to do, like organize their backpacks, working with their planners, emailing their teachers to ask for help, pushing themselves further on their academics. So I'm asking them, using a planner consistently, I'm asking them to do things they're resistant to. So I want to prep them for that. And then the last one I'll talk about is, I'll talk about wait time. So it is a lot of the magic that I have with students who are struggling is because of wait time. It's because I ask a question, and when they respond to me, parents especially, teachers, it's easier for teachers to use wait time because it's not their kid. For you parents though, parents ping pong a lot. The kid says something, the parent responds, and everybody's responding, but nobody is conscious of what they're doing. You're playing out a script a million times over. If you recorded it, you could watch it and you could predict the next sentence everyone's going to say. We want to break that pattern and we want to use wait time. So what I'll do is I'll ask a kid about something and they answer me, and then I wait and pause even longer. So they say, oh yeah, that teacher, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. And I create a lot of space. I cannot tell, and it might seem like I'm not talking about executive function in this talk even. I don't even know if I defined it yet. Don't worry, I'll get there. But if we use wait time, they feel more secure. They feel more heard. They feel like we're taking time. And often us adults, we know what needs to be done. Just do it. But they can't just do it. So we need to help them feel heard and seen and really listen and really connect and relate. It's so important. So wait time, I think, is the third one I'll mention. So those are some relational tools. I can make a PDF for you if you all want. I don't have one for you yet. All right, here we go. Finally, what is executive function? It takes place in the prefrontal cortex of the brain, the front third of the brain. And basically what happens is executive function is getting stuff done. That's it. And for kids, keep it simple, people. All they have to get done is schoolwork and responsibilities. They don't have problem executing when it's a preferred activity, like socializing, like doing their gaming or whatever. But they do when it comes to schoolwork and responsibilities. The problem is the resistance. And then how do you get stuff done? You have to learn systems, mindsets, and routines, and baby steps are everything. So there is the marshmallow studies. I'm not going to talk about that, but you can research that. It's very interesting. Has to do with self-control and executive function. There are many aspects of executive function. I'm going to go through them rather quickly. One aspect of executive function is planning. Planning is not just using a planner, people. You don't just hand 1,000 middle schoolers the same exact planner and say, use it. And my kids that struggle with executive function do not read the thing in the front of the planner about how to use a planner. okay? Your kids with good executive function will, they don't. So they need to be directly taught. Planning is so complex. We really need to learn a daily plan, monthly plan, long-term plan. So I work a lot with planning. Time management is related to planning. Organization is part of executive function in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. Prioritizing the most important thing rather than the preferred thing is part of executive function. My taxes were due last night. My accountant called me at 9 o'clock at night to finish a detail. Why? Because that was her priority. So her priority last night was all of her clients' taxes. That's not necessarily, I mean, these kids a lot of times do things at the last minute. Decision making is part of executive function. A lot of times these kids who struggle with executive function struggle with good decision making, and they tend to be impulsive. Inhibition means not being impulsive, thinking things through, not just saying what comes to your mind. So that's part of executive function. It's developing in the brain, but these kids tend to be impulsive and not inhibiting when they need to all the time. Being able to concentrate, pay attention, or focus is part of executive function. And what's the opposite of focus? Distraction. These kids are distracted, distractible, they're unfocused. That's part of executive function. Being able to resist distraction through inhibition. That's part of executive function. Missing details. This kid did fine on this paper, but they forgot their name. Being able to juggle things in your mind, that's called working memory. Working memory is part of executive function. These kids tend to miss details and be forgetful. Transitioning and pivoting, which I mentioned before about, getting out the door in the morning, pivoting from class to class. Self-starting, follow through, and completion. Task initiation, task persistence, and task completion are part of executive function. Self-awareness, metacognition, introspection, self-reflection is part of executive function. These kids often are not reflecting on, hey, this worked well for me, I'll keep doing it. This didn't work, I should change it. They're not putting two and two together with these things. We have to teach them, help them build the skills of reflection. Overwhelm is not part of executive function. Emotional regulation is part of executive function, but these kids often get overwhelmed. The red dot is the amygdala that I mentioned before, and the front part, the purple, green, and blue is more the prefrontal cortex area where executive function happens. Advocacy is not executive function, but this is something that I work a lot with, so I put it in there, teaching my kids to advocate for themselves. They do not do that well. Now, I have the assessment that I showed you earlier on my website. If you're new to the webinar, there's my site, SethPerler.com. I have this assessment here for you. There's my YouTube channel. So for those of you who joined us late, I have this assessment, which is very thorough and goes over everything. This is very concrete. What I'm teaching you right now is more abstract. This is concrete. So you're going to want to get that. I'll show you where to get that, but that stuff will be found on my site. All right. It is 5:50 here in Colorado. Trying to keep track of time. All right, what do we got to do to help these kids? We got to connect, attune, help them feel safe. I want to talk a little bit about co-regulation. You can look at this picture and you can literally look at a picture of a different species and you can literally feel how it feels. That is co-regulation. This is one of the most important tools I can teach you is to consciously begin to co-regulate more and more, to mirror, to vibe off of your child and notice what their nervous system is experiencing rather than just the narrative and the story. You can tell what this kid feels just by looking at the picture. You can tell what that dog feels just by looking at the picture. You can tell what Michael Jordan feels by looking at the picture. So the attunement is very important. So I just want to mention that again. Connect, attune, help them feel safe, co-regulate. For teachers out there, content, process, product, and environment is huge. So I'm sure some of you teachers have heard of that with differentiation, maybe some haven't. But when I was creating curriculum, I create what's called creatively differentiated curriculum. I want to give as much choice in the content, process, and product as possible. And for kids who struggle with executive function, I want to give them as many choices within a container as possible. So that might be too much overwhelm for some kids having a lot of choices, particularly highly linear kids who just want to be told exactly what to do. These kids need choices, ownership, buy-in. So content, process, and product, teachers, this is how the content's what you're teaching. The process is how you're teaching it or how they're learning it. And the product is how they're showing their learning. Unfortunately, particularly in middle and high school, our products usually are tests and homeworks. So we have essay tests, we have multiple choice, short answer tests, and then we have homeworks. And oftentimes those are in the form of worksheets or some online thing. And those products are so limited and so not creative and so unengaging. So we want to think, how can we really create content, process, and product to increase engagement? So I talk here about how do we assess engagement. Like if I had my wish, I wish that when they were assessing teachers or schools, they'd assess how engaged are the students rather than the data from the standardized tests and stuff like that. Because if we're looking at engagement, that's totally changes the playing field of how we're going to design our teaching. So I would encourage you to be looking at how engaged the students are. It's going to be really hard this fall, but the more you can differentiate for content, process, and product teachers this fall, the more in an environment, because some of you are going to be online, some are going to be in person, the more you can differentiate for those things, the more choice they have, the more you can free up how you do grading. Now I'm going to talk about grading real quick, teachers. So parents, this is good for you to hear too. I'm a fan of rubrics. I'm not a fan of letter grades, but rubrics are very concrete. In fact, this assessment that I created is basically a rubric. I'm sure you've seen them before, but being a teacher who learns how to design rubrics is going to be so empowering to you because you can give the kids a lot of freedom. And you can get away from feeling like anybody's failing something, because if they're putting forth effort and they're working on things in the rubric, you can specifically look at the exact metrics you want to look at within a project. I'm a fan of project-based learning rather than more task-based stuff. A lot of curriculum is very task-based, very do the questions at the end of the chapter, very unengaging. How can we raise that engagement? Rubrics really allow you the freedom to create experiences, learning experiences rather than learning tasks. So I'm a big fan of rubrics. So I really want to encourage you to look at engagement and how to increase engagement. Spoke theory, I'm not going to talk about right now. Assessing your classroom. I guess the main thing that I want to mention when it comes to assessing your classroom for kids who struggle with executive function is you in your classroom have systems and processes in place. Your kids with good executive function listen to you. So when you explain to the whole class, here's how this system works, here's where you put the homework, here's where the supplies are. The kids with good executive, here's how to write your homework down in your planner. Kids with strong executive function, they hear you. The kids that I'm working with don't. It's in one ear, out the other ear. It didn't sync. So to support these kids, you want to make your classroom foolproof. You want to have things visual, bright, big. So when they say, where do we put the homework? You say, go look right there. I wrote it on the wall. And there's something that explains the process very simply, very concretely. It's made in a huge font, and you're not enabling them because you're saying, there's the instructions. I want you to independently do it. So making things visual, thinking about also a lot of these kids who struggle with sensory things, what's going on with their senses in the classroom, do an audit of that. Some need more stimulus, some need less. And this is hard because every kid's so different, but how can you optimize the classroom in terms of things like that? So anyhow, really audit the classroom for executive function. And I guess the way to frame that is, how can you make your classroom executive function friendly, which means, and parents, you can do this at home too, how can you make their processes, the expectations, as concrete and simple as possible? How can you help them execute through creating an environment that makes execution easier? It's 5:56. I got 4 minutes and 5 million more slides. Okay, so, one of the parents said teachers don't teach executive function. Again, okay. I just want to mention direct instruction is needed for these kids who struggle with executive function. Patiently, persistently, you're going to have to say it a million times over. That's just the way it is. It's going to take them a long time to get these systems. Their brains aren't systems thinkers' brains. These things that I have down here, that I have down in the bottom here are more or less covered in one way or another. And the paper management, the SSS, that is on this assessment that I made here. So that's all in there. I just won't go into the details with that now because of time. Franken study is just basically Seth's way of saying differentiation. This guitar is called Frankenstrat. It's Eddie Van Halen's guitar. He built it. He made it a mashup of a bunch of different things to make it perfect for him. One of the most famous guitars in rock and roll history. He made it. He Frankenstratted it. He made up his own thing. That's what we want to help kids do. A lot of times what we do is, again, we give all the kids the same planner, all the kids the same folder system or the same instruction around things. We really need to be personalizing, differentiating even these executive function systems for these kids, helping them create their own systems, getting the buy-in, the ownership. Clean slating, I'm not going to talk about. Minimalism and downsizing parents, this is huge. The less stuff your kid has, the less stuff they have to manage. The more stuff they have, the more they have to manage. How can you help them minimize and downsize and declutter their lives, their inboxes, their minds even? How can we help them declutter so that they can simplify life? This is Steve Jobs and what he used to wear. Basically, it's always the same thing. So homes for everything, visual, 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 label everything. These kids are not systems. This visual stuff is big. Okay, I'm not going to read this to you, but I'm going to tell you about it. Teachers. One of the biggest complaints that I get from parents and the students, but the parents are really complaining, they don't understand what you want. They don't know when you update your portal. Some teachers, particularly when we're talking middle and high school, because for you younger kids, parents with the younger kids, you may have one or two teachers. Here in middle and high school, they have 6, 7 teachers. One teacher updates on Friday, one teacher updates randomly, one teacher updates every day. They have one teacher who's on Schoology, one who's on Infinite Campus, one who has their own personalized website. They don't know where to look, when to look. They're so confused. So teachers, one of the best things, and then parents are like, I don't understand. Their kid says, no, I turned it in. I swear I turned it in. The parent says, well, your portal shows that you have a 0. And they're like, no, I turned it in. I promise. I remember. I can totally see. And then 2 weeks later, they find it crumpled up in the seat of the car or whatever. Look, teachers, the more you can be very crystal clear about your expectations, the better. Parents don't understand. They're not mind readers. This is a continuing frustration for these parents. They're trying to support their kids. They don't want to bug you, and they don't know what's going on. So what I want you teachers to do that will help everybody, including yourself, is to have an FAQ, a frequently asked questions. And that FAQ, and Diane, I see time here, so I'll wrap up and then do Q&A soon. But this is important and this is concrete. Teachers, in your FAQ, your frequently asked questions, you're going to answer all the questions that you always get. How often do you update the portal? What are the exact links that they should click? When should they click those exact links? What should they be looking for? For example, my students often will look at the grade of the class. Like they'll say, oh, I have a 76.2, but they don't look at the grade detail. I have to teach them how to do that. So you want to teach parents that. You can use something called Loom to show parents how to find your portal, how to access it. You can tell parents, I don't want your kid doing my homework for 2 hours a night. If it's taking too long, email me at this email address. Tell me what's going on so I can work with you. Parents need that invitation. They want that invitation because especially a lot of the highly linear parents, the taskmasters, they want their kid to get everything done. But a lot of these kids with attentional and processing issues, who it takes them forever to do things, they're really falling through the cracks. Another thing, teachers, is what's your grading policy? for the kids who struggle with executive function, when they get 50% off for something late or a 0 for something late, what do you think that does to their motivation to ever do that thing? They say to me and they say to their parents, it's useless. Why should I do it? And parents will often be like, well, you should do it because just get it done. It'll help you learn the thing, blah, blah, blah. Anyhow, have an FAQ. Put it on every email you have, link it back to your FAQ, whether it's a Google Doc or it's on your website or wherever, make it findable everywhere so that all the questions are there. So that, and then also in your Google Calendar or whatever you do to list your homework, put the PDF so that parents can download it. I get the kids who I'm going through their backpack. We find 4 copies of the same thing. I say, why do you have 4 copies of this? They say, oh, I lost it and I kept asking my teacher for another copy. I'm sure that annoys you teachers. So put the PDF on, and when they ask you for another copy, say, oh, it's online. You know where it is. If you'd like, I'd happily email your parents where it's at. They do not want you to email their parents, and they will become more responsible like that. But so make your systems easier. Put the FAQs, put all the details. A lot of times when we look at the portals, it's vague. I'm sitting there as the coach going, what the heck does this teacher mean? I don't understand what you're supposed to do tonight. I don't even understand when it's due or what the details are, and I'm trying to figure this out. I can't imagine. I've been in education for 20 some years. I can't imagine what parents are going through trying to figure this stuff out. So that's one of the biggest things I can say for you for this fall is be explicit. I have that down somewhere in one of my slides, but just be super crystal clear. Have an FAQ and have for each assignment really what the expectations are. Oh, another thing I think you should add is how long it should take. So if you think it should take 20 to 30 minutes, write that. Then parents can say, hey, your teacher said it should take 20 to 30 minutes. What the heck is going on here? And then you can figure out, is it a processing issue? Is it an avoidance issue? Is it a combination? Yada, yada. So anyhow, all right, bada boom, bada bang, where are we at? Okay, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about that. I will mention this real quick. So parents, your child needs to have ownership and buy-in in a study space that is customized and personalized to them. I know that some people have different configurations in your home or your apartment for where your kid studies. The worst place to study is in bed, hands down. For my kids who are not the focus kids, for them to study in bed. And then I would also say, if it's possible to not study in their bedroom, if they have a space where they can really sit down. They don't have to be there all the time, but in bed and on the couch where they're all slumped in, you know, I'm standing right now. I'm at a standing desk. I have standing desks in my office for my kids. You don't have to stand, but you can see I can move. For my executive function brain, this is so helpful for me to be able to focus on everything. So anyhow, you want to help them create a sacred study space. I have stuff about that all over my website. So I did want to mention that one. Calendars and planning. I have today's plan on my website. Talked about advocacy, Sunday night overall, that's important. I have this on my website. Parents and teachers, these kids, this is important. This is a biggie and this is concrete. These kids are typically not systems thinkers. They are what I call overhaulers. They're not maintainers. Maintainers are your kids with good executive function. Their folders always look great. Their backpack always looks great. They make their bed in the morning. They brush their teeth without having to be told. They like systems and they maintain them. These kids do not maintain them. So having a Sunday night overhaul, look up SNO or Sunday night overhaul on my site, where each week they overhaul their systems, they overhaul their planner, they overhaul their backpack, their folders, looking at their portals, looking at their grades. So they'll overhaul the key systems in their life. That is so important for these kids. So important. I cannot tell you, a weekly overhaul of these main systems is a lifesaver, and it's helping them engage in the executive function skills they will need for middle school, high school, college, and life. So that is one of the most concrete, most important things. You teachers can do a weekly overhaul in certain things in your class with all the kids, or with just the ones who are struggling and need it, and parents, it's really important to do the Sunday night overhaul. Setting up the browser and the portals. Okay, boom, boom. I think this will be my last one. Chunking. These kids are overwhelmed. So I'm going to wrap up with this one. Teachers and parents both. These kids are overwhelmed. They don't know where to start. They are not sequential. Their mind does not see, oh, I need to get from point A to point B on this paper. I should do pre-writing and outlining, and then I should write a draft, and then I should edit it and have somebody edit it and revise it with me or for me, and then I should polish it up, and then I should turn it in, and I'll be all done. They don't think like that. Imagine that their map has scribbles from A to B. It's all over the place. So we need to teach them how to do this. We need to teach them how to do this. How do we do that? Well, in one way or another, what we are doing is we are chunking. We are taking a big thing like writing a paper, studying for a test, doing the application for college, whatever the thing is, the big overwhelming thing to them that's filled with micro tasks. We are taking it and we are chunking it down into small pieces. They do not do this naturally, so we need to help them learn methods of doing this. How do we chunk? 2 ways. That's it. 2 ways. That's it. 1, we chunk things down by time. Maybe you are going to see a doctor and the doctor has a 15-minute slot for you. That's chunked by time. Maybe you are going to work on your taxes for 3 hours on a Saturday. That's chunking by time. Maybe you're going to work on cleaning the garage this summer for a day. That's chunking by time. Maybe they work on math for 5 minutes or 30 minutes, or maybe they study for a test for 60 minutes or whatever. That's chunking by time. Chunking by task is, hey, I got this math paper. I'm going to do 3 of them. That's a task. I'm going to do 1 of them. I'm going to do the front side. I'm going to do the hard ones first. I'm going to do my social studies homework first. These are by task or subtask or micro task. How do you eat an elephant? A bite at a time. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with 1 step. These kids need to see the bite size. When they're overwhelmed, their nervous system, when they see the big giant task, their nervous system says, I'm going to procrastinate. I'm resistant. I'll do it some other time, because they don't know where to start. It feels too big. It somatically in the body feels too big. They're having a physical experience of rejection, of contraction, of no, of resistance. So learning how to help kids learn to chunk is so big. So a lot of what I'm doing with their daily plan, with their nightly plan, with their planners, with when we're doing homework, when we're doing papers, when we're studying, is teaching them how to chunk so that they can handle it. Bada boom, bada bang, bada boom, bada bang, boom. Okay. The most important thing, I'll give anybody in the chat $1,600 if you can tell me the most important thing. Just kidding, I'm not giving you any money. The most important thing is the relationship. I started the presentation basically that way, and I'm ending that way. I always start and end the same way. If nothing else, parents and teachers, the connection and having healthy, secure attachment, mirroring healthy ways of working with emotion, the narrative and the body, co-regulating, really working with building the relationship, and the safe relationship is the most important thing of anything. That's what's going to help them get over the resistance. That's what's going to help you get buy-in. One of the biggest questions I get from parents is, how do we get buy-in? That's what's going to help you get ownership. We want them to feel heard and listened to and understood and known and supported. So that is that. There's one other thing here, doing our own deep inner work. I think I mentioned that before, but when you do your own deep inner work, you are mirroring, whether you're a parent or a teacher, and you're doing your own deep inner work. What that means is psychotherapy, counselors, therapists, self-development books, journaling, meditation. If you're of a religion, doing your practices for your religion, whatever it is for you to do your own deep inner work, to work on your own stuff and look deep in there at the scary stuff, that that translates to them and is such a great model for them. So I want to end with that the relationship is number one. Now, as I said at the beginning, this is going to be like drinking from the fire hose. So right here is my homepage. You can sign up. You don't need to sign up here. I already have you all done. You guys are good. You're signed up. You'll get my blog on Sunday. I'll do Q&A in a second. Hold on. This is my YouTube, SethPerler.com. If you want to subscribe there and start checking out the YouTube stuff. My site is filled. I make so much content. It's crazy. I have no life. I go deep and I really help problem solve these things. Again, I don't want you to go through my whole site and my vlog and look for all the specific strategies, although they're helpful. Go more for the vibe. That's what's going to help you help the kids most. So in my site, I'm going to put in the chat right now this page, this secret page. This is not a public page. So here is the iceberg theory one that I mentioned before. This is the assessment that's on the secret page that you can download. That page is here. So what you do is you go to my site, SethPerler.com, and you put the / here in the address, and you go to the page that's called Attendees Gift. ATT. I'm going to cut and paste this for you right now into the chat so that you can snag it right from the chat, and you can open up that link right now. That link will be available until Saturday, this Saturday. I will email you tomorrow, so you do not have to worry about this link. And if you're watching the replay and you weren't here live, I will email you all tomorrow with the link right here. The link has some discount to my EF 101 program, which is an amazing executive function program for parents and teachers. So in that executive function program, I literally do a section all for teachers, all for parents, and then what you both need to know together, but I break it down in a much more linear way than I did tonight. I'm sure your brains are exhausted, and mine is very exhausted. We've got a bunch of people on here live right now, but that will take you to this VIP page that has this download here. So you just click it, it'll open up your download to the PDF so that you can print off the assessment and yada, yada, yada. Okay, I think we are good there. Okay, having said that, I'm gonna breathe. If you just breathe because you saw me, you co-regulated. We don't even think about it. It's very powerful. I'm grateful to you parents and teachers and anybody else who's here that you're taking the time to learn about my passion, executive function, and how to help kids get from that point A to point B, which is where you want the kids to get, where they've had the education, and you can breathe a sigh of relief and say, this kid has good enough executive function, and they're gonna be okay. They can get the stuff done that they need to get done to have a good life, a good future, good relationships, and a good career. Thank you so much for being here. And at this point, I am going to do Q&A. So I will look at the Q&A, I'll look at the chat, and we may even be able to bring people on live if you want.